Hello and welcome to episode 9 of Astro Magnet. I'm Arush Ramadurai,
And I'm Ishan Chakrabarti.
and today we're talking to Melissa Franklin, Mallinckrodt Professor of Physics at Harvard University.
Welcome to the podcast, Professor Franklin.
Hey, it's great to be here.
When did you first get interested in physics? Why are you interested in physics?
Yeah. I got interested in physics at about the age of 14. I was really interested in philosophy, and then I started reading some of the people who created quantum mechanics, who came up with quantum mechanics. They wrote books. They were sort of on the edge of philosophical books, or sort of describing quantum mechanics and being a little philosophical. You know, they'd take walks in the woods in Germany and then think, or go on the mountains or something. So I started by reading those books, and then I started studying physics. I was a high school dropout at that point, so I had a lot of time to read books.
So were there any research experiences that you particularly enjoyed in high school or in college or beyond?
I didn't have any research experience in high school. I basically didn't go. In college, the thing that got me really excited about being a physicist was my first research experience was at Fermilab when I was a sophomore in college. I wasn't a very good student, but I asked the professor if I could work at Fermilab on their experiment, and they said no. And then I said, I'll work for free. And they said yes. And so I went to Fermilab, and it was so much fun because I come from a kind of family of people who are in their heads a lot. They writers, filmmakers, etc. Nobody ever uses screwdrivers or, anything. And I got to drive forklifts, and I got to drill into concrete, and I got to glue big things together, and stay up all night on shift. There were many physical things that I really liked about doing physics, and I had never been introduced to those things before. Even in college, there was very little of hands-on work.
Can you talk a little bit about the trajectory of your career? So what kind of education you received that prepared you for it in, undergraduate, graduate years?
Yeah. I've always been a little slow. So I wasn't really ready for college because I didn't go to high school. And then, so I was always a little bit behind at college because I had to catch up. But I went to the University of Toronto, and I had really good teachers who helped a lot. And it was a very exciting time. So I got, by doing research really every single summer, I got a lot of experience on what it means to be a scientist. In those days, I don't know, you guys can even imagine this, but learning to code was with cards where you punched holes in them. And I know that sounds weird, but just taking the deck of cards to the computer so they could read them. You met other people, and then you would talk about physics. So I think one of the things I like most about my job is talking about physics. The actual physics, sort of you can have a conversation with any other physicist about pretty much anything in physics, and it can be fun, even if it's like a high school problem. Maybe it's a high school problem that you know how to do, but there's something weird about it, and maybe there's more to be said or more to be studied. So yeah, so I like talking about physics.
So what's your main focus of research now?
Right now, I work at a proton-proton collider. It's a big, huge accelerator complex in Geneva, Switzerland. It's called CERN. It's a multi-country laboratory. So all the different countries put money in, about roughly $1 per person per country $1 per person per capita in every country. And we collide protons together at really, really high energy. So what we try and do is we try and take a lot of energy and put it in a really small space for a really short time, and see what happens. And so what we like to do is see what comes out. So essentially you're taking you're putting a lot of E in and possibly getting a big MC squared out. So you might be able to create a really heavy particle or some kind of new particle that we don't know about. I mean, we have this thing called the Standard Model, which probably tells you everything that you need to know about what all the particles and forces are, but it's not quite complete. And so we're constantly trying to complete it. So the thing I'm actually looking for is I'm looking for new kinds of particles that have a lifetime which is longer than any of the ones we know. So that would mean that the particle would be made in this collision and then would go out for a while, like maybe an inch and then decay, or maybe 3 inches and then decay. So we're looking for things like that. And so they're sort of called exotic. I'm looking for exotic things, exotic particles, sort of like exotic dancers, but they're particles. And they don't have legs.
Could you discuss a little more like the motivation behind trying to find those, like what we would be able to know about physics
Right.
from
So
those?
yeah, so that's a really good question. So so right now, okay. So what this experiment used to do, what we've been doing is we've coming up with this Standard Model. We know there are 6 quarks and 6 leptons. So these are particles that make up all of matter. And then we sort of understood all the forces between them. Okay, that was good. And then we said, well, if you take all the particles away, like you vacuum them all out, what do you have left? Just in space-time, what's there? And so in order to understand that, that's kind of interesting, right? Like it's, okay, I understand matter now. Now take all the matter away. Is there anything there? Is there energy there? What is there? It turns out there's a field there called the Higgs field, not filled with grass, but a field with energy in it. So when you take everything out in space-time, you just have this energy field called the Higgs field. And if you are able to somehow tickle that field with energy, you can make a Higgs boson. So we discovered that in 2012. 12, yeah. And now we've been studying that a lot. Okay, we're studying a lot of Higgs boson. So one of the questions is, what is this Higgs boson? It lasts only a billionth of a billionth, a millionth of a billionth of a billionth of a second. What is it when it decays? What does it decay into? And one of the questions is, does it decay into some kind of weird new particles or just the particles we know? So that's one thing. The other thing the other reason we might be looking at this is there's something about the Standard Model which theoretically isn't quite right. Things don't add up. It looks like if this model is to work, you would need to take a dial that you had to turn with a really fine, really fine gradations and turn it to 1 part in 10 to the 23. Like it would have to be perfect. And you think, this theory there's something wrong with this theory where I have to have a knob that has to have incredibly accurate specifications. So we call that a problem. And in a sense, we call the fine-tuning problem. So we don't like to have a theory which is very, very fine-tuned. We'd rather have a theory that's very robust. It doesn't depend on these things. So one of the things we're doing is we're just looking beyond the Standard Model, like anything beyond the Standard Model. What could there be? So there's a bunch of theories. So there's a bunch of people called theorists. I'm an experimentalist, and there's a bunch of people called theorists who sit in their offices with a pad and paper, and they come up with ideas. and theories of like how you could solve this problem. And some of them came up with this idea called supersymmetry, which would mean that for all the particles we already know, there would be some sparticles, some supersymmetric particles that have some symmetry relation to particles, and they would solve this problem of fine tuning. But we haven't found any. We've been looking for a lot of time. Yeah. So one of the things we're doing is we're looking for new particles beyond the standard model that might give us some insight into why our theory, which is incredibly good, isn't perfect. Does that make any sense?
It does, yeah.
It does.
Would you, if I can just ask one more follow-up question on that,
Yeah.
how far are we in terms of that research?
Okay, so here's a problem. You see these accelerators, they take, you can't make the accelerators accelerate the particles at any energy. We're very limited, and we're limited by superconducting magnets. So let's say we're limited. So we can only, you would need to increase the energy about 10 orders of magnitude in order to really rule out all possibilities for this supersymmetry. And we're never going to do that, or at least we're never going to do it while I'm alive. And therefore, I don't care. So, but so how close are we? Here's what we do. Every day we go into work, with our little lunch packet and our cup of coffee, and we exclude possibilities. We take data and we say, well, we looked here and we didn't find it, but it's a very large space that we're looking in. So I can't tell you how close we are because I don't know if there is anything. I don't know whether there is. Maybe this is all there is. Maybe this is the theory, the final theory. So it's a good question, though. It's a good question. Now there's a guy, a theorist at Princeton, who says that he will never believe that the theory of supersymmetry is wrong, no matter what we measure. So that's a problem. I mean, it's not just his problem. It's a problem. He's a very smart guy. So if he can't be convinced, then we better find something. But there's other models other than supersymmetry. There's hidden valley. There's all kinds of dark sector theories. It's kind of exciting. You should really go into physics and become a physicist, I think, because it's very imaginative. You just sit around and imagine. And then if you're like me, you sit around and imagine while you're drinking coffee, and then you build something when you're not.
So are there any other like big unsolved physics questions you think might be solved soon? And then the ones you mentioned.
Solved soon. Let's just think. Well, I mean, the dark matter, you know about dark matter probably, because this is astro something, right? I mean, it's either going to be solved or not going to be solved soon. Which means that we're coming to a point where we might have to rethink how we're looking or how we're thinking about it. So people are looking in these underground experiments. Soon, in about 5 years, I think we won't be able to look that way anymore. So we'll have to figure some other things out. We also look at the collider. We look for dark matter, but we definitely haven't seen any. Yeah. So what else? I don't know. What else is there? There's dark matter. There's the vacuum. I guess I guess in my field, there's also this question about neutrinos, but that's a less easy question to even state. Yeah.
What would you say is the favorite part of your job?
I really like students. I like bossing them around. No, I like I like students because I like talking about physics. But I don't think I would, so I wouldn't want to do this job if there were no students. Just wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do the job if I didn't get to use my hands. And I wouldn't do the job. I think the favorite part of my job is that I get to do a whole bunch of different things, so I never get bored. That is, I do electronics, I build things, I take data, I do data analysis. I teach, I talk, I think, I write on the board, I write on the whiteboard, the chalkboard, the iPad, and I am sort of developing my physics brain, sort of like my lizard brain. So yeah, I like the fact that it's really good job for someone with ADD because there's so many exciting parts of it, and you don't have to do the same thing all day long.
So what career challenges have you run into and how did you navigate them?
I've been incredibly lucky in my career, especially because I didn't really want to be a professor. I grew up thinking professors were kind of boring and kind of narrow and not fun, just because of the ones that lived on my street when I grew up. So I was pretty happy anytime I got any job at all. So I think, let's see, what career problems? I think there's only one thing that ever happened to me, and that is that I'm a Canadian, and that was the problem. No, and I wanted to go to Canada and work, and they didn't really want me. No, they thought I might be a woman. They thought I might, be politically active in rights for women. They didn't like that. A lot has changed in the past 30 years, but so I didn't go to Canada. So I think that's the only time in my career where someone has sort of pointed me out as female and said, "Oh, we're worried that you'll be an activist and do something bad." I know it sounds like a very strange thing, right? But mostly in physics, people don't really care what you are.
Oh yeah, that sounds very weird for sure. So what advice do you have for students aspiring for a career track in your field or like physics in general?
Yeah, so I have to say that the thing, physics in general, is for high school students, start doing research as early as possible. I constantly have people writing me letters saying, please, can I come as a high school student and be in your lab? But even if you can't do it in high school, I mean, there's always some lab. There's always somebody who will teach you something in high school. But then when you get to college, it doesn't really matter so much what college you go to, but it should be a research. It's better if it's, well, okay, I shouldn't say that. It's always good if it's a research university, because then you can, and then you want to actually go around and make sure you work in a lab early on. Even if you want to be a theorist, you should work in a lab, because then you sort of learn about how everything works. Theorists have to know also how to do experiments. I mean, they have to know that there are experiments. So yes, so I always tell people, and this is what I'm going to say, just get involved immediately. And if you're at a liberal arts college, like not an art, what's called Research One University, there's still people doing interesting research you can get involved in. But don't wait. A lot of times people go to college and then they say, in the summer, they say, I'm going to go work at, Goldman Sachs. And I'm thinking, I don't understand. You're here, you have so many possibilities. Why don't you do physics research? It's so fun. Yeah, the thing is, you got to just, if you have an opportunity to do research, just do it. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good.
Is it all right if interested high school students contacted you for advice or guidance via email?
Yeah, sure. They do all the time. I have little kids writing to me. Sometimes I have little kids writing to me, and then like 10 years later, they'll say, hi, I'm in college. Remember me? I don't know. Anyway, yeah. But there's lots, I think what people don't know is you can write to lots of people doing physics, and they might actually answer. Yeah. Also, I think the one thing I would say is, one of the things I like about doing science is the intensity of it. You're sort of like a desperado. You really want to find something, and it's intense, and you can sort of feel like you're riding a horse. Okay, not like riding a horse like with a little hat on or something, but you're riding a horse through the chaparral looking for something. Is that yeah.
A very interesting comparison. Thank you for your time. So that was Melissa Franklin, and to learn more about her field, check out our website for additional resources.
Thank you. And we'll be back with another episode.